Hey guys, this is part 2 of the DAC Roundup. If you haven't seen part 1, I will put a link in the description down below. Enjoy. Okay, while we have it here, I don't have it right in front of me right now. They're back with Alex, but I got some B-roll for you. The Chord TT2 and the M Scaler. These units are just so damn expensive for this Roundup, but I have them here, so at the same time, why not see what a stack that costs over $10,000 gets you? I'm very curious about this. As for my thoughts, the quick and dirty is, it really is a level above the Qutest. The sound is cleaner and even more precise. The same characteristics of airiness, sweetness, incisiveness, they were all refined upon, and it was just so easy to plug in my ARES to the TT2's single-ended headphone jack on the front and listen without worrying or about tweaking this or that. It was just sort of in Chord we trust moment where you just sit back and let the units do their thing while enjoying every second of it. You also have more I/O options with the TT2 with balanced XLR outputs, dual toslink input options, and more. Comparing just the DACs, the Qutest and the TT2 one-on-one with each other, I plugged them both directly into the Drop 789, and I have to say it, but after listening to the TT2 on the M Scaler, it's really hard to go back to just the Chord Qutest alone. The TT2 with Chord's upsampling box here, it really is a level above. Song In My Life by Veronica Mortensen and The Best I Ever Had by Sinig, they sound so amazingly lifelike. There really is a noticeable difference here. It's very accurate, very intimate with the TT2 stack, and it's hard to picture something better. I know there's more expensive DACs, but I would just love to hear how they handle these songs. And to avoid sounding like a complete hype beast when it comes to the TT2 and M Scaler, it's not like a huge, enormous change when you're comparing to the Qutest again. It's just enough where it gives you that extra edge and quality for that better sense of realism. But to me, that extra edge is well worth the premium price if you have the cash to spare for this hobby. Some of you guys have just tons of cash, or maybe you don't, you got tons of credit cards, but you know, if you're willing to fork over that cash for the TT2, then I can understand why. As for the TT2's onboard amp versus the Drop 789, this was a fun comparison. The Drop is actually noticeably better. They're both very clean, but the TH amp simply has better impact, better dynamics, bass has more texture, it's more plentiful. The 789, it just has more power and you can really feel it. Both are very clean, but the 789 wins out for those characteristics. If you have the TT2 and are not using an outboard amp, consider getting the $300 or $350 now, I forget how much it costs, Drop 789. You'll retain that crystal clear sound, but have some power and more dynamics to go along with it. And lastly, I'll mention that although I loved how the D90 excelled in producing the darkest blacks, well, the TT2 meets or exceeds that in that regard. I was pleasantly surprised to hear how clean and silent this DAC was when it needed to be. But damn, the TT2 and the M Scaler together retail for $10,300. My used Toyota is literally worth less than these two. Luckily for me, I invested in Roku a year ago, and they happen to be doing amazing this year. Let's see how much is in my account. Well, you know, I only started with $100, so I doubled my money. I just have to do this every year, and then I can get the Chord stack in 2027. Big win for me. Bottom line, if you're able to demo the TT2 mated with an M Scaler in a quiet environment, please do so. Or if you're unable to demo them but are able to afford them, do so with some confidence. These aren't so highly regarded and praised for no reason. If you're looking for a lifelike presentation, intimate sound signature, and the sweet chord house sound, it really is the best of the bunch. And if you want to compare the TT2 stack to the Chord Qutest, check out Passion for Sound's review in the comments or the description. He eloquently describes how the Qutest with the M Scaler sounds better than the TT2 alone. So if you have the TT2 with no M Scaler, the Chord Qutest with the M Scaler sounds better than the TT2. Pretty cool. Overall, I did that test myself, and overall I agree with them, but to be honest, if I can afford a $5,000 M Scaler, I'm going all in and grabbing the TT2 as well. And this was just for fun and giggles. I connected the M Scaler to the other DACs on Mount Dacmore, which was a fun little experiment. I was limited to 176 or 192 kilohertz maximum upsample rate, since only the dual BNC outputs provide that full 768 kilohertz sampling rate. So with the Hugo M Scaler's 1 million tap technology connected to any of these DACs, the chord sound is very apparent. You get the sweet sound, slightly rounded off edges, which creates a softer and easier to listen to presentation. I thought it would have the most effect on the D9D, but although it removed some glare and added that sweet sound, I felt I actually got more of a change on the R2R DACs. On the multibits, I would hear this slight glare when it came to cymbal crashes and in the upper frequency range in general. It's very slight, but it's there compared to the Ares. The M Scaler actually removes this glare and makes more for a lifelike listen. It was pretty remarkable. With the Ares II, it also sounded more lifelike with the M Scaler, but it unfortunately softened a bit of that engaging mid-frequency presentation that I really liked. Vocals weren't as center stage when upsampling via Chord's device, so I was kind of torn on this aspect. I still really enjoyed hearing that sweet sound signature, mated with the organic sound of the Ares, but I felt like the soul of the Ares just wasn't there. It wasn't the same. So in the end, the M Scaler is a fun add-on, but I think it works best when you're able to crank out its full sample rate potential with its dual BNC connections on another Chord device. So now let's get into some amp pairings. Always a crowd favorite. You probably have one of these amps, or something with the sound signature that leans towards one of these classes of amps. But really quickly, these are THX amps, SML SP200 on top, drop 789 on bottom. Here's the Violectric V280. Here is the Cayin HA6A. And I also did some pretty extensive testing with the Wu Audio WA22. But here you got your really transparent side of things. Here's warm and organic sounding, both solid states here. And you got your big open and reverby, just tubey sound that a lot of people go for on this end of the scale. Now, regarding the THX amps here, I do have to mention that I started this review with the SMSL SP200. And although I enjoy its performance for the price, I noticed something odd was going on with its RCA inputs. I felt things weren't coming through as clear and as full compared to the other amps that were going through XLR in. My suspicions were pretty much confirmed when I plugged the Chord TT2 in with both its XLR and RCA outputs. And from there I would toggle back and forth with a switch on the front of the SP200. Some clarity was noticeably lost on the single-ended input here. I felt this was hurting the Chord Qutest performance in this Roundup, especially since it's a single-ended only DAC with RCA outputs. So I did what any good, respectable audio reviewer would do. I bought a used drop THX 789 here in its place, and lo and behold, it didn't exhibit the same issue. It also just sounded better overall by a bit, and more powerful too on all inputs. So that was a nice little upgrade. So let's start on the THX side of the scale. There's something really special about mating a smooth DAC with a highly detailed amp. The Ares II connected to the Drop 789 is one such case. You get that big, wide, and impactful sound, topped off with the lush mids, and the way the Ares masterfully handles high-frequency cymbal hits is showcased in the setup. I feel this is so transparent that the amps are removed, and I'm just enjoying the Ares by itself without anything else in the way. Now, as for the multi-bits over here, most everything about the Ares applies, but with a couple of differences. There is more detail and more emphasis on the upper mid-range. Things feel a tad sharper and more defined, so in the end you do lose out on some of that liquid gooey mid-range that the Ares provides, but honestly it's a great balance between clarity and gooiness, which I've mentioned before. The 789 is more than able to extract those micro details in the upper mid-range with ease. It's really a great combination here. Now with the RME and D90 on the THX, you almost get, in my mind, what I consider detail overload. It sounds really good still, but after hearing the R2Rs and switching back and forth, I wish I had more of those organic traits that I was hearing before. There were also times that I felt things got harsh and I would have to turn the volume down. Super detailed DACs on a super detailed amp will give you all the information possible, but it doesn't necessarily sound real or may not keep you engaged over time. This can depend on your headphone as well. With this setup, I much preferred something like the ZMF Aeolus, which is a much more forgiving headphone, still sounds amazing, over something that's less forgiving and very detailed like the Sennheiser HD800S. The Qutest over here on the THX amps, it does sound very detailed while not cramming those details down your eardrum, which I really appreciated. Where it especially went out is in the realism department, as the Drop 789 really showcased how well and precise the transients are on the Q. It's very clean, and it's just a really pleasing combination with those two. All right, switching to the Violectric V280, comparing it to the Drop 789 with all the different DACs was a really fun exercise, to be honest. This amp is over 3 times the price. It's going on drop right now. I forget how much it costs exactly, but it definitely isn't as transparent as the THX amps over here. But with the Ares II on this, the soundstage feels bigger. It feels more echoey, impactful on the V280. The hit of a snare drum, it reverberates longer and has more of a spacious feel. The Ares really gets to show off its soundstage capabilities on something like this, though at a cost of clarity, as we're moving from something more neutral and transparent to something more warm and organic. As far as the Bifrost 2 and the Multibits, as much as I adore the Ares II, the Multibits were a better match for the V280. The increase in clarity mates nicely with this warmer sounding amplifier. That R2R organic smoothness is still very much there, but now we have the addition of those higher eardrum tickling frequencies that I like. And I also have to say I prefer the Gumby here with its extra bass capabilities, which the powerful Violectric handles beautifully. The Army and the D90, they also mate nicely with the warmer V280, as you can imagine. Where I complained that these units on an amp as neutral as the THX models here, I felt like they were overly detailed, but the way the V280 rolls off those upper frequencies, it's just an excellent way to handle all of those details. It adds a level of richness and warmth the THX amps did not, and this is exactly what Freed, the owner of the Violectric brand, wanted for this specific line of amps. It's the Lake People company. They own different lines. The Violectric in particular leans more on the warmer side, and it mates nicely with the super detailed DACs. I really like this combination, especially for electronic tracks. Now, as for the Qutest here, it sounds great. Everything I've said about its sweet sound applies here. Funny thing is, as big sounding and as powerful as the V280 is, the Qutest kind of makes it sound like a gentle giant. The voices and instruments come in soft and relaxed, but the amp can really perform when a lot is going on. Violins, they're very smooth, very full sounding, fuller than the 789, and very detailed at the same time. That said, I think a more transparent amp such as the THX models shows off the Qutest handling of transients better. So while you may get a more musical presentation from the Violectric, the technicalities are much more apparent on the THX models. So moving to the tube amps, and again, I tested both the Cayin and the Wu Audio. As far as the Ares II on the tube amps, I know what you're thinking. It's a smooth DAC paired with a smooth tube amp, and it would leave you for wanting more details. And the truth is, it's only partly right. The combination of these two does smooth out some micro details, and the transient response suffers a bit. So strumming guitars, cymbals, and snare hits, they don't feel as lifelike as the competition. Where this combo shines though is the soundstage. The Ares has that big immaculate 3D spacious soundstage, especially for its price, and hooking it up to a tube amp just kind of magnifies that with this big open sound. So where you lose out on the micro details, you do gain it in the soundstage. That said, the Ares II was not my first choice when it came to tube amps. So with the multi-bits on the tubes, you instantly notice more details and more texture, which to me, it felt like it breathed more life into the tracks that I was listening to. The soundstage isn't as wide as the Ares, but the overall presentation is better, it's more balanced, it has more clarity and more separation. So that was a big plus there. The D90 and the Army, they were a nice jump for me in a better direction, as details were increasingly more apparent, but funnily enough, I actually missed the smoothness of the R2R DACs, especially on the highly resolving HA6A here. To help remedy this, I would switch the filters on both DACs to slow, and I felt, to me, it hit a real sweet spot. The soundstage wasn't as nice as the R2Rs, but to get this level of resolution from a tube amp, especially the WA22 with its smoother sound signature, that amp uses 6 NS7 drivers, which in general are smoother and better to most tube heads, but that combination was a real joy. As far as the Qutest on tubes, it was really nice, really nice. The sweet sound signature and excellent transients combined with the power and the bigger, wider sound nuances of a good tube amp was extremely fun to listen to. The echoes of the blues tracks that I was listening to was really detailed. It sounded more lifelike with the Q and the WA22. It was closest to feeling like I was in a blues club listening to the artist live. That combination in particular more than anything else here. The next closest in sound that I preferred for tubes was the Gungnir. Both to me felt like they were doing everything right. What gave the Qutest the slight edge for me was that sweet sound that I keep bringing up. You could very well have the same level of enjoyment with the Gumby and its refined mid-forward presentation. It really just depends on the song and your personal preference. I think you can't lose with either in the tubes case. And that's it. I can't believe we're finally at the end. We got the chip-based Delta Sigmas. We got the Delta Sigma here with an FPGA-based chip. And we have the R2R DACs. So now the question is, which is the best one under 1,000 bucks? If I personally only wanted to spend around $700 and no more on a DAC, and I only had a highly resolving solid state amp as the THX models, then I think I would choose the Bifrost too. It to me was a great all-arounder and very close in sound to the $1,300 Gungnir. From there, if you lean more towards smooth and organic, then you can pick up an Ares II, that won't disappoint. And there's also the D90, which I consider to be an insane amount of value. It's a bit polarizing though, because if you're talking on THX amps, it's it's tons of details. But if you personally prefer extremely resolving clarity above all else, if you're newish to the hobby, because when you're newish to the hobby, I find that you prefer dynamics and you like hearing all those fun details, and there's nothing wrong with it. If you listen to electronic music in particular, if you're just like a measurement geek and you like the best measurements, like you're a recording engineer, then the D90 is probably right up your alley. And once you go over $1,000, I feel like you can't really lose with the three that I have in this roundup. Gungnir not pictured, but it's included. The RME for me is just an excellent all-arounder. It does exhibit that digital sound that I described earlier, but it's smoother than the D90, and its tweakability can't be matched by another consumer DAC on the market, at least none that I know of. The Chord here nearly lives up to the hype in my opinion. I say nearly because the way it's been talked about, you see the price and you see people just talking crazy about it on the forums, it sometimes makes it sound like the second coming of Jeebus, and you're just so curious about it. But we have it here, and I mean, it does sound the most natural, but don't expect that night and day difference that you get moving from like a cheap DAC to any one of these. The magic for me happened when you give it some time in a quiet environment and you kind of listen to the nuances of its custom FPGA implementation. The Gungnir, that one really surprised me the most. It sounds even better than the Bifrost too, and it's cheaper than the Qutest. It doesn't quite give you that sense of realism that the Chord does, but I really do appreciate that rich R2R sound coupled with the extra clarity that Multibit seems to provide. If anything, this makes me really want to try a Yggdrasil now, also from the same company. If I could possibly add some other DACs for variety's sake, there would be two. I'd love to throw an ESS Sabre-based DAC into the mix. These chips are the main competition for AKM. They are generally known for being a bit sharper and perhaps more precise, comparatively, than the more fluid-sounding AK chips. I'd also love to have a DAC with a tube-based output stage. I've never heard one before, but that reviewer that I mentioned earlier, Thomas in Stereo, he gave a great review to the Musical Paradise DAC, and they start at $500. There's also the Cayin iDAC 6 Mark II. It also has 2 based output stage, and both of these use ESS chips. So maybe we'll get one in for a future review and knock both out. And just my personal thoughts after spending months at a time reviewing all of this. A personal challenge for me when comparing all these DACs, it was catching myself focusing on the minute details and technicalities of certain parts of songs. I would have to stop myself, then just kind of sit back and listen if the overall experience was indeed pleasurable or not. We can get so caught up in the little things, but I think the bigger question to ask yourself is what I'm hearing better than the sum of all of its parts? Instead of focusing on how well you could hear a guitar player reposition their hands over the strings, I think you should focus more on the music being played, how much it's affecting you, do you get some emotion out of it, and do you just like it better? And to me, that's where the real enjoyment lies. And lastly, I'll leave you with this quote someone posted on a audio forum somewhere, but I love it and I never forgot it. But it essentially was, "It all sounds fake, just pick the fake you like and be done with it." There's no reason to get upset or mad if someone doesn't have the same DAC as you, if they prefer, distortion and you prefer specs, to each their own, and just enjoy what you have. So that does it for us here today. This was a ton of work and I hope you got something out of it. If so, please hit the like button, consider subscribing to see more content just like this. So happy listening, and we'll see you in the next one.